Hey everyone, welcome back to Sarah's Vegan Kitchen. I hope you're all doing really well. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing the highly requested review for the Vegan 100. This is a cookbook by Avant-Garde Vegan or Gaz Oakley, and there's over 100 recipes in this book, so I feel like this review and my recipe tests are kind of just barely scratching the surface. I may do a part 2 specifically to try out a couple of his seitan and faux meat recipes, because I feel like that's kind of what he's known for, especially on YouTube. I know he has recipe videos for vegan steak and vegan bacon that look very intricate and realistic, and I've been meaning to try those for the longest time. So stay tuned for a potential part 2 to this review. This book has a lot of variety in it. It's broken up into a bunch of different sections, from breakfast to mains, soups, there's desserts, there's sides, and much more. So I tried to pick recipes that would kind of give you an idea of what to expect from the book as a whole. And my friends over at Skillshare have kindly offered to sponsor today's video, so stick around to the end if you're interested in learning more about that. But for now, I'm gonna hop into my first recipe review. The first recipe was for Kentucky barbecue pulled jackfruit and shiitake lettuce wraps. I cleaned out and thinly sliced my shiitake mushrooms, cutting off the thick, rough parts of the stems. Then I prepared 2 cans of young green jackfruit by cutting out the tough core of each piece and shredding the softer part of the fruit by hand. Usually I do like to use all of the jackfruit, including the core and the seeds, and then I just stew it for a long time to soften everything up, but this recipe comes together much faster than my usual method, so I wanted to give it a try and just use the soft parts. I also thinly sliced a red onion and measured out my spices. The seasoning for this recipe included smoked paprika, cayenne pepper, cumin, a little bit of sugar, and it called for dried sage, which I didn't have on hand, and since I knew that I would probably never use it after this recipe, I decided not to buy it and I just used some poultry spice. And I coated the shredded jackfruit in this spice mixture. I first sauteed the onion and mushrooms till they were tender and a bit caramelized, and I did this all in my cast iron pan so I could get a little bit of extra charred flavor on there. And then I added the jackfruit and continued to cook for a few minutes before adding in some barbecue sauce. Now, the book also includes a recipe for homemade barbecue sauce along with a lot of other sauces and staples, but just to keep things simple and a little bit lazy, I just used my favorite store-bought barbecue sauce. So I let the jackfruit stew in that sauce, and in the meantime I prepared a quick rainbow slaw recipe from this book with thinly sliced red cabbage, shredded carrots, thinly sliced red onion, and a big handful of chopped cilantro and mayo. The book recommends serving the jackfruit in lettuce wraps, which I did the following day with the leftovers, but that night I served it as tacos and corn tortillas, and Eric had his on a burger bun like a pulled pork sandwich, and we served them with a side of fries. And for these, I kind of loosely used the directions from his fish and chips recipe, also from this book. So I parboiled the potatoes before I tossed them in olive oil and cornstarch, and his recipe actually calls for flour, but I've been on a little gluten-free experiment lately, and the cornstarch worked fine as a substitute in this case. The barbecue jackfruit was the first recipe and by far my favorite that I've tested from the book. I'm a big fan of jackfruit. I've shared my recipes for it on the channel several times, but I haven't been making it that often because Eric's not the biggest fan of it, and we usually eat dinner together, and he doesn't mind it. You know, if I'm really craving it and want to make it, he'll eat it and he won't complain, but he'd prefer other things, and I was really curious to see if he'd prefer it more if I added in the shiitake mushrooms, and he definitely did. He even took the leftovers to work the following day. The shiitake mushrooms just add a lot of extra umami to the jackfruit mixture, and they have this chew to them that makes the entire dish overall a little bit more meaty. If you are an avid viewer of Sarah's Vegan Kitchen, you'll probably know that I tend to keep my spices pretty minimal. I just basically add onion powder, garlic powder, and paprika to everything, my nutritional yeast and salt and pepper, of course. But I found that at least the recipes I tried in this book, he's very creative with his spices, and it helped get me out of my box. Like, I never personally would gravitate towards adding toasted fennel or the dried sage, and I didn't add the dried sage. I added poultry spice, which contains sage, but you know, those are spices that I typically wouldn't use, and they added so much to the dish, so I'm glad that I got that experience. The rainbow slaw recipe is very simple. It really just is dressed with plain vegan mayo. Typically I would add more things to my slaw, so I probably wouldn't make this particular recipe again, but it was still good, and there was enough flavor in the pulled jackfruit that I didn't feel like I was missing anything. The next recipe I tested was for Tofu Tikka Kebabs. We start out by marinating a block of cubed firm tofu, and the marinade consists of plain vegan yogurt with lots of great flavors. So we've got some crushed garlic, lots of minced ginger, finely chopped chilies, which I left the seeds in so that it would be spicy, some ground cumin, ground coriander, turmeric, and salt. Big squeeze of lemon juice, and a big handful of chopped cilantro. I mixed all that together and added in my cubed tofu along with some chopped red and yellow bell pepper cut into about 1-inch pieces and some chopped red onion. I actually ended up marinating these overnight before coming back and threading them onto some skewers and baking them. And before I tossed them in the oven, I did spoon a little bit of the extra marinade over. Now on the same page, she also includes a recipe for a carrot salad to accompany the kebabs, but I decided to just skip that bit because it called for an ingredient that I wasn't going to be able to find, namely black onion seeds. I'm not sure what those are, but maybe I'll look for them in the future. I just decided to serve these with rice. The Tofu Tikka Kebabs was the second recipe that I tried, and I was very excited about this one because I love tofu and I love all of the flavors that he included in his marinade. And I've made chicken tikka masala. I've used a yogurt marinade for meat, but I figured that the yogurt was just to kind of tenderize the meat, and I wasn't sure if it would have that same effect, if it was even worth using for tofu. But it definitely added a lot of flavor. I just love the inclusion of all of the fresh ingredients and flavors in the marinade. The garlic, the ginger, the fresh chilies, the lemon, the cilantro is just amazing. When it warms up a little bit, I'm absolutely going to make this recipe exactly as written again and throw it on the grill. I feel like the extra char from the grill and the smokiness would make it taste so good. And I also think this would be really good made with seitan or tempeh. And this recipe gets another 2 thumbs up for me. So at this point, I was very excited about trying a bunch of other recipes from this book. The next recipe I was super excited about. It's for Sriracha Meatballs. The base of the meatballs is crumbled firm tofu. To that we add sliced green onions, crushed garlic, some red chili, sesame oil, tomato paste, and sriracha. To bind the ingredients together, we add buckwheat flour and a chia-based egg replacer. And I did choose to add a little bit of extra buckwheat flour because the mixture seemed a little bit loose to me. It was probably just to do with the moisture in the particular tofu I had. I used a little cookie dough scooper to portion out the mixture into about golf ball sized meatballs, and then I rolled those out in my palms and arranged them on a lined baking tray. Then I sauteed those in a nonstick skillet with some coconut oil to brown the exterior, and I tried to roll them around and brown them as evenly as possible. After that, you throw them back onto the lined baking tray and bake them until they're cooked. I tried to kind of copy the presentation from the book, so I served the meatballs over a bed of thin rice noodles with some fresh cucumber and carrots. I also blackened some asparagus and broccolini on my griddle pan with just a little bit of olive oil and salt and pepper. Then we spoon over a simple sauce made of sriracha, ketchup, maple syrup, and water. You whisk those together and heat them. And then I garnished everything with some sesame seeds and thinly sliced green onions. So this recipe I was also very excited about because you guys know about my love affair with sriracha, and I'd never made a meatball recipe, like a vegan meatball recipe that was tofu based. I've always used lentils or faux beef crumbles or mushrooms or something like that. So I was very excited to see if I could get something good using tofu. This recipe was good, don't get me wrong. It wasn't my favorite because I felt that the flavor of the meatballs was just slightly bland, and I'm not sure if it just needed a little bit more salt or maybe something to add some savory flavor like Worcestershire sauce or soy, but I just think that when you use tofu as the base, tofu on its own is quite bland and you need something extra to kick it up a notch. But I really did like the concept of having a meatball that had so many fresh flavors in it. The scallions and garlic and fresh chili, I love that he included those things, and I felt like they did add great flavor and a little bit of heat to the meatballs. I also would have liked the meatballs to be a little bit firmer, and I think that maybe that was just, maybe I should have squeezed out or pressed the tofu to really get it dry, or maybe even use like a super firm, extra high protein tofu next time to make it firmer. But I did add extra buckwheat flour, hoping to kind of make it firmer, and it was still a little bit mushy. And then the last part, I just felt the sauce was a little bit weird, like it was missing something. It was very sweet, right? Because it's sriracha ketchup and maple syrup. I would have liked to see something savory in there just to balance it out. Like I wanted the sauce to be flavorful and savory enough to be good with just the noodles on its own. And I found I ended up adding some salt and a little drizzle of soy sauce to my bowl. But I feel like the recipe could be tweaked a little bit. I think it's a good starting point, and it wasn't bad by any means, but it just wasn't my favorite thing I'd tried from the book so far. And of course I had to try a dessert recipe to round out my review, and the salted caramel almond and cacao bars sounded amazing. There are 3 layers to this dessert. The first one calls for macadamia nuts, coconut flakes, some almond butter, and ground almonds. We combined that in a food processor with melted coconut and agave, or in my case, I substituted in maple syrup because that's what I had on hand. We press this crust layer into a parchment-lined pan, throw it in the freezer, and in the meantime, prepare a date caramel layer. For this, we have lots of pitted medjool dates. We combine these in a blender with coconut oil, almond milk, water, salt, and vanilla extract. And the recipe actually calls for a vanilla bean paste, but I chose to just use extract because I was being cheap and lazy. Once we spread the caramel layer over the crust, we allow it to firm up in the freezer for several hours. And then lastly, we top it with an easy chocolate coating made of melted coconut oil, cocoa powder, and agave, or in my case, again, maple syrup. The recipe also recommends topping the dessert with pretzels or flaked almonds, but I forgot to buy pretzels, so I just served it as is. These bars were so good. I was a little skeptical because I've made some predominantly raw vegan desserts before and they just tasted healthy, you know what I mean? But these were really good. Like, even if you didn't know they were raw, they'd be good. I love how simple the ingredients are. I love the idea of not using refined flours and refined sugar. You guys may or may not know, I've shared about it in previous videos, but my skin also gives me a lot of issues when I have just like even moderate amounts of white flour or refined oils and sugars. And so I have to be very cautious about when I'm gonna eat desserts. And I can enjoy them, but I kind of just have to accept that I'm gonna break out afterwards or that my stomach's gonna hurt. And I don't get the same reaction from raw desserts or desserts that are made with more minimally processed ingredients. So I really, really, really like these bars. The date caramel was so good. Like, I blended it up and I tasted it, and it tasted like if you've ever taken condensed milk, a can of that, and boiled it and it turns into dulce de leche, it tasted like that. It was so creamy and like buttery. I don't know how dates taste so amazing. I think the one thing I maybe do if I make these again is cut the biscuit layer in half because I felt it was very thick. And I'd really like the caramel to be a little bit more of the star of the show here. So I'd make a thinner bottom layer, and then I would probably add more dates to the caramel just to make it a bit thicker. I found mine was a little bit on the softer side so that when I took the dessert out of the freezer, the caramel was already soft enough to cut through. I like to make it a little bit thicker so that I could defrost it and everything could soften up a bit. And then, you know, I wouldn't have to keep them quite so cold. But those are just little tweaks I'd make that come completely down to preference. And there's always variation in like the moisture in the dates that you buy. So that could be skewing my results as well. But overall, the concept of this recipe is so good. And it definitely has me inspired to try out more vegan raw desserts. So overall, I love this book and highly recommend it. I feel like you get a lot of value because there's so many recipes in here and such variety. I was a little worried when I bought this book because if you saw my Miyoko's homemade vegan pantry cookbook review, you might remember that one of my complaints was that the recipes were quite time consuming and some of them called for ingredients that were hard to come by, that maybe you had to order online. And from the videos that I've seen by Avant-Garde Vegan on YouTube, I was kind of thinking that all of these recipes were going to be very time consuming and very posh, and because he's Avant-Garde Vegan. He makes like restaurant quality, a little bit fancier recipes, which I love and appreciate, but that's not the kind of cooking I typically prefer to do. I actually find that a majority of these recipes are very accessible. They're not too hard or time consuming. They don't require a bunch of crazy ingredients. I think what I love most about this book is that I don't know, I just get so excited when I'm paging through. There's so many photos and I love his food styling. It's amazing. So I just get a lot of inspiration by just paging through it. This might be one of the few cookbooks that I own that I actually feel like I'm gonna make more recipes from it. Like tonight, I think I'm gonna make the carrot and red onion bhajis. Well, I really like this book. I think you should definitely check it out if you have been on the fence about whether it's worth the money. There's so many recipes in here. I think that you'll get your money's worth. And again, I may do a part 2 to this review, trying out a couple of his faux meat recipes. There's an eggplant bacon recipe I would really like to try out because I've tried making eggplant bacon before and it burnt and it was weird. And if he has a successful recipe in here, I would love to try that because I love eggplant. So before I close out today's video, I wanted to give a shout out to the sponsor, which is an online learning community called Skillshare, and a premium membership earns you access to over 26,000 courses in topics like business, design, technology, marketing, and more. I've been using Skillshare for over a year now, and during that time I've learned so much about digital photography and editing photos in Lightroom, and now I've kind of transitioned to learning more about music just to supplement the piano lessons that I started in January. So right now I'm working through a music theory course. I really, really, really want to be a good musician. It's like up here on my list of goals that I must accomplish in this lifetime. And it's something I told myself was impossible for so long because I didn't take music lessons when I was growing up and I thought that it was pointless to start as an adult. And I'm really, really glad that I took the leap at the beginning of 2019. And I'm also really grateful for Skillshare for making it easy and affordable to learn a little bit extra in addition to my piano lessons. There's over 7 million members, so you can connect with like-minded students who are taking the same courses as you, and you can participate in class projects and get feedback from instructors. So whether you're looking to take up a new creative hobby or just polish up your professional skills for your career or your side hustle, I think Skillshare is a great option. And if you're interested in trying it out, the first 500 people who click on the link down below will get a 2-month free trial of Skillshare. And then if you love it as much as I do and want to continue after the free trial, membership starts at $10 a month. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much. I'd love if you would leave a comment down below. Let me know something you've been learning or something that you're excited to learn. Maybe it's something you've been putting off the way that I was putting off taking piano lessons for so long. Leave a comment down below, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye.